Hi, I'm Rob Roy, and I just got a chance to hang out with Matt here for an episode of Digging In, and had a great time. I got to talk about a lot of cool things, but what all it boils down to is, the sayings that I always go by: act as if, shoot for the big stars. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so listen twice as much as you speak, but be humble, be relentless, and failure's never an option.
Rob, awesome having you on the show. I mean, to me, it's an honor. Told you early on, I'm a huge fan of what you do. Music is so important to so many people. So to have you on, huge honor, because you're going to share wisdom with us. You're going to talk about being a producer, about being an engineer, about being an entrepreneur, and looking forward to it, man. Thank you.
Well, Matt, thanks for having me. And you just set the bar pretty high, so I hope I can live up to it.
That show's over. So listen, so many people know who you are and they know what you do now, and they know, but what they don't know is, how did you get here? What was the start like? What was your journey like? Would you mind taking us back?
So I was always a musician. I gravitated early on in music. My father was a musician. Just when he was back in high school, he played in high school bands, and then always had a guitar around the house. So come like third grade, when it was at the age where they offered lessons, instrumental lessons, I wanted to play drums.
Really?
And my dad was like, hell no, I'm not having those things around the house. No way. So he's like, here's a guitar, kid, play with that. So I started taking lessons, and I took to music. I was a natural. I gravitated towards it. I wasn't necessarily the best guitar player, but I always had drive. As a matter of fact, my music teacher back from school, a guy named David Scantar, his wife had passed away in a cruise ship thing, an organization that they did with the school with a bunch of kids, and she had passed away in a ship fire. So he had created this award for an achievement award for music. And I was still early on, but as you became in 8th grade, you were qualified that somebody in 8th grade got that award every year. And I remember telling him, I'm going to get that award one time. I'm going to get that. That's going to be mine. And sure as shit, I got it. And that was kind of the beginning of my drive, where I realized that if you wanted something and you worked your backside off, you could actually get it.
So the work ethic came, early on,
Well, that and my parents used to, push me. It's like, you're going to earn this. So they always pushed me that, you want something? I'm like, you're not getting a handout, work for it. So it kind of started with that. And then it was always a drive thing for me.
Okay. So wait, did you mention where you were from?
I don't mention it much, but I was actually born and raised in South Florida.
Okay.
So I'm a native Floridian.
Not many of those.
I was going to say I'm one of like
real.
5 kind of a thing. Everybody thinks I'm from New York because I'm a mile a minute. I do 500 things at once, and I'm having 15 conversations at the same time. So they think I'm a New Yorker.
I would have guessed New York.
Yeah,
sure.
when I used to work a lot working in LA and stuff, you're a New Yorker. Yeah, whatever.
And there's no tan.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you get the farmer's tan, or this one's from hanging out the window, but that's about it.
So you got that award. You learned early on about work ethic, right? And at that point, you probably had a dream that was already beginning to form, right?
Exactly. I wanted to be a rock star, just like everybody. I was that kid jumping up and down on his bed with a tennis racket, playing air guitar, wanting to be the next, the next rock star. And as I went into high school, at that time, it was funny because in the late 80s, that's when kind of rock and roll, I grew up in the hair metal bands and things like that. And in the late 80s, everything was or mid 80s rather, Florida became really diverse. You got the Latin music scene, and then they grew into some of the electronic and hip hop music. So everything became really diverse. So my core friends that I hung out with kind of spread out, but I always stuck to music. And I loved playing, I wanted to play in a band. That was my thing. So I reached out to some friends and this and that. I kind of bounced around into a couple of bands, and then finally met up with a group of guys that kind of where it became serious, and it wasn't about cover bands and playing other people's music. I was always kind of into creating and writing. So I kind of fit right into the whole original music scene. So
and you were playing guitar.
I was playing guitar.
Okay.
And I actually answered an ad out of the local magazine back then. It was Rag Magazine, which is now part of South Florida Music Magazine, which coincidentally kind of everything turned around. I work with them very regularly. More on that a little later. But so I answered this ad, and he's like, all right, come on over. And these guys were a little older than I was. I was the young, I was probably 17 at the time. Knock on the door, and he looks at me like, what is this? So they bring him, but we hit it off. His name was Geraldo. And then I met up with the other guys, Sal and Jimmy, which were, dear friends today. And then I brought in a bass player friend of mine, Chris Cosia, who's no longer with us, but that was that kind of the core group. And we started writing and we started creating and we started playing out gigs. And the idea was, the goal was to get a record deal. And even back then, that was, record deals as we know them now are a little different, but back then that was the dream. So we pounded the pavement. I would pick up the phone, call anything, send this out, send that out. I ended up meeting through a friend of mine, the guitar player from Saigon Kick.
Oh, wow.
And he had introduced me to a guy named Tony Ferguson up at Interscope Records. And so I'd gotten his number, and I was kind of relentless. I wouldn't let off the phone and so forth. So he finally said, all right, I'll listen to your stuff. Send me some shit. So my thing is I always want to connect with people. Everything kind of falls back to people. And so I'm wondering, like, how am I going to get this guy who signed, he signed everybody from back then was U2, No Doubt, a bunch of artists. He was the right hand to Jimmy Iovine. So I came up with this idea that if he gets a CD in the mail, he's probably just going to fling it on his desk and, whatever. So I got this box, almost like a treasure box, opened them up, and I put a bright orange Sony Walkman in there with headphones ready to go. The CD was loaded. Everything was kind of displayed.
Just take it and go.
Something different that he would just take it and go. To this day, I always joke about, I'm the orange CD player guy.
Never forgot it. It worked.
He never forgot it.
That's a lesson right there.
So he listened to stuff and so we kind of talked back and forth, and he's like, the stuff's good, and we'll see. And it kind of went to that thing, the we'll see. So a couple of months go by, and I hear through the grapevine that he's going to be at this club down in, I think it's Coconut Creek, called Rock Candy back in the day. And he was actually there flying down to see a band called, I think it was the Grooveniks at the time. And they were playing live, and he was interested in them. So I find out he's going to be there. So I go down there, me and my guitar player, Sal, and we go down there, and we have kind of our promo kit. And so we corner him, and he's with his group of guys, Tony Ferguson, this guy, Tony Bongiovi, and a couple of other people. And so I corner him, I start talking to him, I pull him outside, and I start kind of going over the pitch. And at that time, we were touring as a band ourselves. So we had gotten an RV, we had, Sal's older brother gave us, reminded us of this, always said this thing called act as if. So we would pull into shows.
That's powerful.
Yeah. Oh, and that's
you're carrying that energy.
That's what stuck with me.
It's believable.
Yeah. I mean, we went from an SUV to a van to an RV to a bigger RV. But we'd pull up at these local shows, and people thought we were rock stars because we acted, we weren't that stuck up snobby. We're always friendly. And
it's a confidence, right? It's a swagger.
You walk in like you're the feature act. And so anyway, what I pitched to them was something a little bit different. I pitched to them a business, not a band. We're self-contained. We're basically a cheap date. Take a shot on us. It's not going to cost you a lot because we're already doing everything. We just need that chance. So, lo and behold, they're like, all right, well, we'll get back with you type of thing. And, we'll give you a call. And I'm like, how do I get them to remember me again? So at the time, I didn't have two nickels to rub together. We were broke musicians, but we worked hard.
You were out of school at this point.
I was out of school. Yeah,
Okay.
I was actually working as I built screen enclosures to
Like outside people's houses?
outside people's houses. That's what I did
Okay.
during the day
Okay.
to support the music habit. We all had day jobs.
Okay.
So I went back in, and I knew all the bartenders and stuff because we played there several times.
Wait, let me just place the time. It sounds like this is like 90, 91?
Yes,
Okay.
right about there.
Because we're the same age. So.
Yeah,
right.
and I'm bad with. I have no concept of time, so feel free to rein me back into timestamps.
Okay.
But anyhow, so I go to the bartender and I said, look, I said, at the end of the night, take my credit card number, put their tab on my credit card. Now I'm like thinking, I got
no money.
Yeah, I got no money, but I got a little bit of credit left.
Right,
I mean,
right.
how bad could this be? You
Right.
know? So, and then give them this with the bill.
Go ahead.
So, Tony, I talked to him a couple times. Ferguson had talked to him a couple times. He thanked me for the bill and stuff and paying for the thing. He was like, it's not necessary. I said, no, I wanted to do something nice and I want you to freaking remember me. He laughed. So some time goes by and my guitar player, Sal, reads in the local newspaper that it's a business organization that has, it's like the Kiwanis clubs and stuff. They have their, annual lunches where they bring in people. This was for the local business community. I don't remember the name of the actual group of business people, but they get together and they have a lunch and they, do presentations and stuff. And there's always a guest speaker.
Like a chamber of commerce.
Like a chamber of commerce,
right.
like a chamber lunch.
Right.
Type
And you're
of
still
thing.
in South Florida.
It's right here in Boca Raton.
Okay. Okay.
So they're having it at this hotel, and it's a private meeting, but they raffle off some tickets, and some outsiders can actually buy tickets to attend. So somehow I ended up with some tickets. So at that time my hair was a lot longer than it is now, but and Sal is the same. So we're coming in suit and tie and long hair, and so we come in and everybody's staring at us. So we managed to get our way in.
Right.
And Tony does his presentation and talking about his story, which is really interesting, starting from, MoTown and working his way up as one of the biggest producers, rock and roll producers, and showing off some gold records and talking. And so there was a Q&A going on. And I remember saying that I'm going to wait to be the last question because I don't remember what the question was, but I remembered saying a question that he would know exactly why I was there. So it gets down. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on. I stood up. I said, actually, I got one last question. And I asked this question and he's like, we'll talk a little more afterwards. He gave me a kind of a quick answer. He goes, we'll talk a little more afterwards. I don't know if he recognized me at that time or not, but so the thing ended and a bunch of the organizers came straight to us and they're like, we're going to introduce you to Tony Bongiovi. And so we came in and I'm like, I don't know if you remember me. And he remembered that day
Really?
when I cornered him at him and Tony Ferguson. So again, I pitched him a business again. He's like, all right.
It's the same pitch though, right?
It's pretty much the same
okay.
pitch. Yeah. I'm still pitching a business.
Okay.
The band was like kind of the product, but I pitched a business around the band.
But you guys were working during that time, building up the band a little bit. Things were happening.
Yeah, things were happening.
Okay.
We were opening up for different artists, some big artists. We were doing our own local shows. We were building a following locally.
Right.
We had traveled to Orlando. We had a following, and so we were doing the legwork ourselves. Just
you
like
were
any
putting in
other
the
band.
time, putting the hours in, and it was
Absolutely.
your own music, right?
It was all of our own music,
Okay.
all original.
Did you write?
I was a co-writer. We all wrote. We all kind of co-wrote a lot of the stuff that was
Music and lyrics? Like, what did you write? Just the music?
I was always good with both. We come up with ideas, and then sometimes the singer would come up, and we collaborate here and there, and it was really.
Was that natural for you, or did you really have to work at it, or did it just really come out of you?
The music always came naturally. It took me time to develop my songwriting, the lyric writing, and. So, which I'll get into quickly in a second because it's kind of part and parcel to the story that's coming up. So Tony invites me, he goes, let's meet up.
Okay.
Come to my apartment. I have a place down here in Fort Lauderdale and we'll talk. So me and Sal go down there and we're listening to the songs and he's, how'd you do this? And, where'd you record this? I'm like, well, I kind of recorded this ourselves.
Right.
So how I got into recording was we couldn't afford to go to a studio. And back then, studios were expensive and the small technology was just coming around where project studios, it's not like it is today. we couldn't afford to go to studios. So I figured, well, let me figure this shit out myself. So I had my music teacher going back to middle school. I always continued a relationship with him, and he got into some analog recording, and I would help him out. So I kind of learned from there. And then I had kind of put a little studio together in our rehearsal warehouse. And that's where I recorded all the band stuff. And so he's listening to some of the stuff, and he's like, you guys are playing, you guys are good. He goes, but I don't quite hear the hit. And the one thing I learned from Tony Bongiovi, now we're talking about, is there's 3 key elements to a hit single. And so when he was going around, I'm like, I'm listening. He goes, and it's real simple. Well, he baits me into the conversation. He goes, what do you think are the 3 key elements? And I'm like, all right, well,
let's see if he can get one right.
Hook on this. And I'm going to, and he goes, I'll make it simple for you. It's real easy. The 3 key elements to a hit single: the song, the song, the song. It's all about the songwriting. And, I gravitated towards that too. I just, later on, I learned a saying. It's like, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Sometimes, listen twice as much as you speak.
That's good.
I wasn't always good at that, but later in years, maybe. Not today, obviously, but anyhow. So he's like, all right. He's like, I'd like to see how you do this. So I want to come see your warehouse. I want to see that, So he came down.
So he liked the sound. Like the quality of what you produce is what he was really into?
Well, hold that thought for a second.
Holding.
So I invite him down to the studio, and I show him the little studio I put together and stuff. And he's listening to all this, and I'm showing him all the things that I'm doing. And he's listening. And, again, he didn't hear the hit, but, he knew the band could play. We were great performers. We had, we could throw down, but just missing that hit. So he's looking at all this stuff, and he goes, you recorded all this? And I'm like, yeah. And I showed him what I was doing. And he's like, you're good, but you suck. And I'm like,
what do you do with that?
Yeah, I'm like kind of taken back, and I don't know how to answer that. I know today what he was doing. But then I was kind of like, I didn't know what to do. What he was waiting for was for me to make excuses. Oh, well, I didn't have this. I didn't have a chance to do that. And I had to do this real quick, and this didn't get finished. He was waiting for me to make excuses. But I didn't make excuses. My response was real simple. I looked at him dead in the eye. I said, then make me not suck. That was the beginning of my career.
You challenged him.
Well, that was the thing, is you told me I sucked, and I said, and that's what he was there. He was showing me some tricks and some, kind of telling me what I was doing wrong. And I said, well, then make me not suck. And what I didn't realize at the time, that statement, how I answered him was the beginning of my career. So what I know now, what he was doing, he was looking to see if I was somebody he could work with. Because, us musicians and us artists, we're the most, insecure people. We're difficult. We're a pain in the ass. It's our creation. We're always right. This is our song. I wrote it that way. He wanted to know that I could take direction. I could work with him, and it wouldn't be a constant fight. So that was the beginning of it. So then he goes, all right.
Wait. That whole time, he likes what you're doing, but he's tuned into what he's hearing you're capable of. You, not the whole band, but you're capable of.
So that's what he had said. He goes, I'm not interested in the band. And it was a pretty heavy band at the time, too. He goes, I don't hear the songs. I don't hear the hits, but I like you. And then I'm like, okay, well, cool. What do we do with that? And he's like, you have good talent. You have talent. He goes, I'm going to make you a great engineer. I said, okay, that's cool. He goes, but it's going to cost you. And I'm like, okay. I said, well, what's it going to cost me? He goes, I'll come down here. I'll take what you have and I'll turn it into the real deal. But when we're done, you're going to buy me dinner. And I'm thinking, oh, shit.
Yeah, okay.
Well, so I'm thinking, like, out to dinner. I'm thinking wine, I'm this and that. I'm like, so I go back to that credit card. I'm like, all right, I got a little bit of room on that credit card. And I'm like,
it's like the deal of the century, by the way.
Well, again, for me, it was always failure's never an option.
Right.
And whatever it took, I would do it.
Right.
I didn't have money, but I'd find a way to do it. So I'm like, okay, all right, I'll pay off the credit card or whatever. Okay, let's do it. The reality was every time he'd come down and kick the back of my chair, do this, do that, faster, faster. When we were done, it was always a slice of pizza. We'd just go out for pizza, $1 slice of pizza.
What about the guys in the band? Because now you had something going on and they weren't part of it.
Well, it wasn't that they weren't part of it at that time. It's that, because the idea was he was going to help me record, and we had a ton of more material that we would start recording.
Oh, it wasn't done.
I didn't, well,
Okay.
that was the whole idea, was like, hey, let's bring this guy in. And, hell, he launched the Ramones, the Talking Heads. He launched their careers. He's produced for, records for Hendrix. And then the Bon Jovi band was part of,
Who?
The Bon Jovi band.
I haven't heard of them.
Yeah, neither.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Okay.
Small guys.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't the end of the band. This was a conduit to a relationship. Again, everything to me is always about people. It was the conduit and relationship to be able to funnel all of our new material in. I mean, this guy, Tony Bongiovi's launched the Ramones, the Talking Heads. You produced Ozzy Osbourne, and obviously the Bon Jovi band.
Okay.
Yeah, Bark at the Moon was his record. Aerosmith's
That's a classic.
Aerosmith's
Every
Rockin'
song
a
was
Hard
great.
Place was his record. So it was one of those things where it's like, we need to keep this relationship, nurture the relationship.
Wait, were you pinching yourself at this point though? Like, how am I working with this guy? I mean,
yeah, it was just
because I'm like, wait, you're making like it's no big deal. It's like, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. Honestly, it was just kind of like
moving fast.
Yeah, everything was moving so fast, but I'm sitting next to I'm like, this is crazy. But one thing I didn't know is that I needed to maintain that relationship. So, so we kept doing this for a while, and then Tony would get some projects, and I kind of became his engineer. So along the way of doing this thing, we rehearsed in this, the band rehearsed in this warehouse complex that we used to call it Band Row. And there was just littered with bands and rehearsal rooms. And, you rehearse and you just kind of go down from, bay to bay to bay to listen to your peers and stuff. And it was kind of a really cool, groove. It was right here in Delray Beach.
It's like, what was it called? Was it the Sound Factory? What was the place what was MoTown's place called? They had a name for it. Wasn't it like the Sound Factory or something?
Well, it was Hitsville.
Hitsville. What am I getting? Sound Factory. Hitsville. Yeah. So it was like your version of Hitsville.
Kind of, yeah. Well, we weren't producing any hits out of there, but it was a group of bands. It was cheap rent that we all got along, and all these different kinds of styles of music, but we all had a common goal, and we all respected each other's work, and it was a really cool thing. A couple bays down, there was a cover band. I had befriended I think it was the bass player at the time, and it was a female singer, and she was really good. So we go watch them, and there were more covers and stuff like that, but she was awesome. And as we were kind of getting to know them, and I started talking with her, and she's like, I really want to do original stuff, but my guys, they want to make some couple bucks, so they just want to focus on the covers. And so I was asking her about her originals and stuff. And so she, played me some of the ideas that we had. And I was like, this is kind of cool. You've got, they're good ideas. Yeah. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll help you kind of work out some of these things and kind of turn these ideas into songs. So we started kind of co-writing on some stuff. And a couple of these songs were like really good. So I was like, well, let's record a couple of these things. So we brought her drummer in. We recorded the drums, I recorded the guitars and the bass and some of the other stuff, and just kind of demoed some stuff out. And I was like, wow, this is so we kind of clicked as a writing team. And so we started developing some of the songwriting and stuff like that. And then finally I kind of talked to Tony. I was like, I think I might have something here. So I let him listen to some of the demos, and he's like, this is pretty good. So I was like, all right, let me go back to the drawing board, and let me put together something see if it'll make sense. So we go back, we start, recording these demos and stuff, and Tony's like, there's something here. And I was like, well, what do we do with it? He goes, let's do a showcase. So he goes, can you put a band?
All girl band.
Well, no, she was just a singer.
Oh, okay.
There was no band, it was just her and I.
Oh, okay, got it.
I used her drummer to cut some of the initial tracks. And then we started writing together, and then some of the later demos, because the band kind of, she was really kind of focusing on the originals now. So the band kind of fell apart. So with some of the demos, I brought in some of my friends to cut tracks, and I hired a drummer. And then I brought in my buddy Sozio Cristofaro, who was an amazing bass player. So he kind of became a part of this project. So we cut some demos, and then it was like, well, let's do a showcase. So my buddy Sozio used to play in this band called Vandal, which, they had some local success. They were out in LA and some stuff, but the band didn't really, they kind of went their own ways. But essentially the band was the backing band that we had used. So we did a showcase over at the Culture Room. The owner of the Culture Room, and we had played there as a heavy band. My band had played there a lot of times, so I knew the owner. I was like, let me have the club on an open night, and I'll so I can do a showcase. And he's like, well, if I can open up the doors and bring people in, he goes, you can bring people in for this thing, let's do it. So I'm like, all right, how am I going to freaking pack a place on a, was it Wednesday or Thursday night, whatever it was. So then I got the idea, and being in the local music scene as long as I have, I go, I know how I can pack the place, because, if I got A&R people there, looking at the band, I need to have a pack. I mean, otherwise it's going to suck playing to an empty room and everybody's going to be kind of sitting there like tapping their foot. Okay. Yeah. So what I told people is I was organizing this thing, and we had probably about, I don't know, it was about 50 people from different A&R. Tony Ferguson was actually one of them that flew in for this thing. So I leaked it out to the local music community. I said, guys, there's going to be like 50 A&R people at this thing. Bring your fucking CDs. Yeah. I go, but hide them. Right. They won't let
don't
you
make
in
it
with
obvious.
them.
Right.
Yeah. Hide the stuff. Come on. And, word got out and we packed the house. So we did a showcase. And the funny thing was during the showcase, the day of, the singer, she started getting this, really bad pains. And so her brother-in-law was a doctor, and it turned out that she was having an appendicitis. And
really?
Like, yeah. And they're like, she can't go on stage. And we're like, back to the failure's not an option thing.
Right.
So we're sitting there, and she's like, I'm like, can you do this? I'm like, if you can't, we can't. And she's like, I can do this. So this poor girl gets up and does this showcase with an acute appendicitis. At the end of the show, we rush her out the back, straight to the hospital, and she has an appendicitis.
God.
Has her appendix removed type of thing. So after the show, we had a couple other bands that went on. There was a band that opened for us, which is a band that was, part of the, Tony's group of writers and stuff, a band called Mind Like Water. So they opened up the show. We did the showcase, and then I brought another band called Nothing Rhymes with Orange. They came in and closed the show. By that, after our show was done, we actually, the A&R people, we all went. We had plans to meet at a restaurant. We had a private room in a restaurant so we could interact and talk about the thing. So we went to, obviously, Marinelle, the singer, she couldn't go, so she's stuck in hospital. And so we went we started interacting with some of the A&R people, and it was a really good thing. And I ended up getting 3 record deals presented to me as a result.
No
of that
shit.
night. So I'm looking at these record deals, and I'm going over these things with Tony, and I follow the money. I'm kind of like, Tony, these things suck. And he's like, that's really all there is out there. Now, mind you, at that time, the big record contracts, they weren't really, as downloading and CD sales started going up and downloading in the days of Napster.
Oh, Napster's hitting now. Metallica's going through their thing with Napster.
Exactly.
Right.
So the record deals is how do they recoup on their investment? So they came up with this concept called a 360 deal, 360 degrees around the artist. So they would essentially become a joint venture with the artist while holding hostage of all their masters. But that way they would participate in album sales, in merchandising, in touring, in endorsements, everything that they could attach, they would participate in. So at the beginnings this was with the very beginnings of these deals, and they were just horrendous. I'm like, what do we need a freaking label for this? I mean, what do we need a label for other than at that time was a P&D deal, packaging and distribution. He's like, well, true, but it would be nice to have some money to record the record. And mind you, my mindset is I pitched Tony Ferguson, then Tony Bonjovi. I pitched them all business deals. So I said, I come from an entrepreneurial family, so it kind of is in my blood, I suppose. So I go to Tony, I said, all right, well, that's fine and dandy. What if I help me put a business plan together? What if I raise some money and we do a joint venture with the record labels? He goes, well, we could do that. So I pull out the pencil, lick the tip. That's an old school reference, but start putting something together.
That can go many ways.
But again, it was about the people. It was about the relationship. So I had Tony. And
again, people, relationships, over and over.
We had, so now kind of alongside of this whole thing going on, Tony had put together Bongiovi Entertainment. And it was an artist development, incubator, and management company that this project I had put together with Marinel, which we had called Lotus Blossom. We had put that together, and that was going to fall under the Bongiovi label. So, and I was a partner in all of that stuff. So, part of Bongiovi Entertainment, you had, Tony Ferguson was a part of that. You had a guy named Don Dempsey who was responsible for, he was the head of CBS Columbia Records back in the day. And then Ron St. Germain, who's a famous producer, and a lot of Tony's personal.
Name I know.
So that was the whole idea, was let me raise money based on some of these relationships that were going to be part of this project. Let me see if I can raise some money. So long and the short of it is I put an investment package together, and I fly up to Boston to sit with an investor friend that I know. Now, this guy, he used to have a table over at the Four Seasons in Boston, and every so often him and these guys would get together, and it was the craziest thing I ever saw. They talk about some of these ventures that they get in, and next thing you know, I see freaking checks flying around the table. It's like
it's happening right there.
Yeah, it's like $100,000 here, all this crazy stuff. So my guy comes in, he goes, "Well, I got this interesting project, and I've got my buddy Rob here I'm involved. I'm gonna get involved with this thing." So he pitched this thing. So he goes, "Pitch the thing." So I put together this deck that kind of goes through the whole thing, step from the beginning to the end. And at the end, I have the pro forma that's, your return on your investment type of all the meat of the deal. So I passed this thing out, and I've rehearsed this thing to start from the beginning and walk through it. And somehow it kind of jumped in my head. I'm like, nobody gives a fuck about a PowerPoint. Nobody reads this stuff. Nobody cares about all this stuff. So I just got in this wild whim. I said, all right, guys, I kind of rehearsed a presentation that starts from the beginning to the end. I said, why don't we do this? Open up the back page. Let's just start at the money, and I'll work backwards. So I did the elevator pitch of the project, what it was, who was involved, and here's the proposition. This is what I'm looking for. This is what we're looking to do. This is how we're going to spend the money, and this is the return on the investment. I said, if you guys want to go back and look at the details, you have it there, but that's pretty much it.
They loved it.
And they were just like, great. That day I got a deal. I got a commitment of roughly $500,000 to do a project. Now, obviously, they're not writing me checks for $500,000. So I had to come up with a drawdown schedule and certain milestones. So I had to sing for my supper. So I'm putting this together. Now I go back to Sozio and Marinel, and we're like, I think we got this. We're going to do it. And so, Marinel especially, she's a little younger. She was younger than I was. She's like, her dream came true. She's getting pretty much a record deal for the most part. So we go back and we're putting together the last details, and I submitted all my documents and all the the schedules and this, that, and the next thing. And I'm just getting ready to kind of commit to the musicians that I want to use, and we were going to record this at Tony's Power Station in New York.
New York, yeah.
So a little quick segue on that. Tony got his start at MoTown. Actually, he got his start in New York, knocking on the doors of the studio. I want to do what you do. And they're like, kid, get out of here. So, Tony's a natural problem solver. He's a true genius in every definition of the word. So his first problem is, how does he get in that door? So he realizes that, he can't get in. They're not letting him in. So he knows that the food delivery guys go back and forth and in and out with no problem. So he goes home, and this is back in, he lives in New Jersey.
Right.
Dad, can I borrow a couple of bucks? Blah, blah, blah. So he takes the money in, stops the food delivery guy, pays for the food, takes the food in, gets his dad's money back, so he doesn't get his ass beaten.
Right.
But he doesn't leave. And so, after doing this a couple of times, a guy named Jim Zach, this was, I think, Media Sound, I believe. But he was looking at Tony. He was like, something, I'll tell you what. Just stand there, keep your mouth shut, and pay attention. He liked his tenacity. So then it turned into, Tony, give me a hand here. And so that's how Tony got started in the business. New York at that time, and this kind of ties back into our studio here that we started back in here in Pompano. But New York at that time was like obsessed with MoTown. MoTown, as we said, Hitsville, they were dominating the charts and that MoTown sound. And everybody at New York was sitting there like, what the hell are they doing? What is making that Motown magical sound? So Tony too becomes fascinated with that. So he goes back home and, builds a little mixer and, creates a little, gets some microphones and goes down in the basement, and then in the garage and kind of starts listening. And he realizes something unique about the Motown. It's very live, very energetic. So he slows it down to half speed and he kind of notices something in the decay time and the reverb. It's different. So he kind of calculates it out and he realizes that there's something different there. So he recreates it at his house, in the garage and this and that, and realizes there's a very short decay time. Back then, reverb chambers, which were rooms, had a decay time. It was like 6 seconds or something crazy like that. This was very short. And it was very bright and short. So he realized that when he slowed it down, so he would take like a New York recording or a California recording, take it, enter it in the room, bring things in to change the acoustic times of the reverberation times, and then he'd feed it back in, and all of a sudden he recreated that energy. So he runs back to New York and he's like, I figured out the Motown sound. Now he's 17 years old at this time. And okay, kid, what makes you say that? And he's like, so he brings this little Wallensack recorder and listen to what he did. And they're like, they would never do that. That's so against general engineering practices that there's no way that's what they're doing. They kind of dismissed him, young kid, whatever. So at that time, Tony's smart enough to know that I can call Motown and ask for the chief engineer. So he goes back home, goes in his dad's back room. Because remember, phone calls, long distance calls.
16-year-old kid.
Yeah. Oh, he's a true genius. He is
I'm thinking genius as you're talking.
He is a genius. He's absolutely a genius. Which is why I knew I had to stay with him, fast forward. But anyhow, so he runs back home. He goes into the back room of his parents' house and makes this phone call from New Jersey to Hitsville. Now, phone calls back then were expensive. He knows he was going to get
paying long distance.
He was going to probably get a beating for that one. Yeah. So, he picks up the phone. He's talking a mile a minute. Can I speak to the chief engineer, please, Mike McLean? He looked him up. This is Mike McLean. How can I help you? Hi, this is Tony Bongiovi. He's 1,000 miles an hour. He goes, he explains that, who he is, where he's from, and I figured out the Motown sound. Oh yeah, kid, what makes you say that? So he explains to him what he did. Dead silence. So Mike McLean goes, kid, I'll call you back. So McLean goes straight to Berry Gordy. Now, at that time on the Motown records, they never put the engineers' names because they didn't want people to reach out to figure out that sound. Mike goes to Berry Gordy. Somebody in New Jersey, in New York, knows what we're doing, how we're doing that Motown sound. And he's like, all right, let's figure
You better bring this guy in.
So that basically they sent somebody out there that was in New York. And so long and the short of it, they hired his ass. So at 16 years old, he's going to high school during the week. And then Friday, he leaves, gets on a plane and goes to, and he's an engineer at Motown. His first engineering job is Diana Ross. He's just like,
that's crazy.
And he's just mesmerized all the people he looked up to, his musical heroes that now he's recording with them. So, he goes in, it's a long, he has awesome story about all that stuff. But anyway, so, he's commuting. Originally, he was supposed to go to MIT to become an engineer. Well, going to Motown on the weekends, he was already living it. So instead of going to MIT in Massachusetts, he goes to MIT in Detroit. Motown Institute of Technology. That's the joke. But anyhow, so going from Motown and stuff, he became one of the number one, producers out there and the go-to. Everybody wanted to take what he learned out there and incorporate it into what was happening in New York. So he redid Media Sound and Apostolic Studios and then built his studio, Power Station. That was the number one studio.
You back up a sec, because I didn't want to stop you there, but when you were describing the difference in that time,
sure,
right? What you were saying was the people that were listening to it, and it was endless amounts of new songs coming out, but they did have that sound. That created a certain feeling.
Back to that vibration conversation.
That's what I wanted to go to. That created a feeling that they figured like, wow, people are feeling good.
It is an energy that just transcended into people as they were listening, and somehow it would just people would gravitate towards that.
And every song they put out,
It was
It
part
had
of
that same vibe, same.
pretty much the same thing. So that was
And
the
you
secret.
can't help but loving it, and you're moving to it, and it's like in your head.
So
And he figured it out.
and that sound was part of an accident. We'll get into that later. But anyway, back to the story and how this kind of segues back to me is back to where I got the record deal and stuff, and we were going to go to Power Station New York that he finally built. He opened that up, I believe, in '76. And so I raised the money, and that was where we were going to go to New York, his old studio, to record it.
So they let him go. Like, they didn't try to keep him there.
Well, no, he ended up going off on his own. And so, Tony, now everybody wanted to work with him. So, he started producing, launched a lot of careers. He launched Gloria Gaynor's career, produced her first song. The first two Ramones records are his, Talking Heads 77. Ozzy Osbourne's, Bark at the Moon, and Aerosmith's Rockin' a Hard Place, and obviously his cousin John. They kind of came together, and that was the history.
So he left Motown and then went to do that.
Right. So as being a big producer, that's when he built his studio, Power Station.
And you were there though. You were with him throughout that.
Oh no, this was before I was born. All this stuff.
No. Once he went to Power Station.
Well, no, he built Power Station.
Yeah.
So how that started was, he took what he learned at Motown and adapted it into the different recording studios that were already there. And then what he learned from that, he decided to open up his own studio. And what he did is the mayor of New York gave him a smoking deal on a old Con Edison power station. Get the connection?
I got it.
So this, and coincidentally, years prior, they had converted this into a television set, and it was the original Let's Make a Deal was actually filmed.
Oh, no
there.
kidding.
So it was abandoned after that. So Tony got a good deal from Mayor Koch to buy the building at a great cost, and he built the studio. Took this design that he had, and every acoustical engineer or designer said, "This will never work. This will never work." And it wasn't until the end, and he got it together. And as a matter of fact, he almost wasn't able to complete it until until a record, the original Miko Star Wars, which is a disco instrumental record, hit. And that first royalty check is what allowed Power Station New York to be completed. Now, Power Station New York, Tony's design arguably has more awards than any studio in the world because of that design. So, and that's where everything kind of took off from there. So, and I met Tony, and this was in '76. So I met Tony, decades later. So back to my story was, we were going to go to that Power Station to record the record. And that's why I got, with the investment, we were going to do the record there. Now, just before I was getting ready to, pull down the first amount of money, woke up one morning on September 11th and Twin Towers had come down. And, all of us were just speechless, obviously. It was just, we didn't know what was going on. A couple of days later, I get a call from, I call up my investor group, the main guy there, and he's like, "Listen, Rob, I don't know how to tell you this, but, they were heavily invested in aviation. They're like, look, the deal's good. It just got to wait. We didn't expect a plane to run into buildings and stuff. And, they had helicopter tour companies out in like the Las Vegas and area out there. And he's like, I've got helicopter payments I got to make, and I got no business coming in." And so his idea, he was going to kind of fund the stall out of his pocket. And then as his competition couldn't last, he was going to buy them all out, at pennies which he did, as a matter of fact.
Good plan.
But, that was the long-term effect of that. But so what that did with us is it put it on hold. So it's like, okay, no problem. We understand. It is what it is. So, we just kept doing our pre-production and kept, writing and just kind of waiting. We'll wait it out. No big deal. We've been through enough on this stuff. So, weeks turned to months, and, then all of a sudden, it was the morale of Marinell and Sozio and all the other people that were going to be part of this thing. So I'm like, I knew I had to do something. So I'm thinking, I've had studios from when I built the studio in my band's rehearsal space to, and I'd left there. I'd actually parted ways with the band because I wanted to focus on this project. And they continued on. We're all dear friends to this day. But anyhow, I was like, I got to keep this together. It's going to fall apart at the seams. This girl got her dream come true and the carpet's being pulled out from under her. So, all right, I've always had studios. I've got Tony in my back pocket who built the world's most legendary studio. So I'm like, all right, well, fuck it. I'm going to take over a warehouse space and I'm going to build out something kind of cheap and dirty, have Tony help me out. And I'm going to continue the project there. And then when the money comes back, then we'll go to New York. So I go to all the classifieds, but back then it was, classified.
I remember.
ads.
Yep.
And I found an ad for this warehouse in Pompano. So I kind of go there and it's just this empty warehouse bay here, commercial or county property in Pompano, which I'm kind of looking around. I'm calling this place more like Pompton. So I'm like, the rent was the right price. It was cheap enough. And I'm like, fuck it, let's do it. So I take over the lease. I lease the place there and I start building the place out myself. Just building everything out, and
you're investing in your own money in it.
Yeah, it's called a credit card again. Remember
Back
that
to the
credit card
credit
thing?
card.
Back to the
Same
credit
one.
card. Probably was, and my dad saw my vision and he helped me. He let me use one of his credit cards because I didn't have enough room on it. So anyway, I'm building this thing out, and the idea was let me build it out enough that I can, keep doing pre-production and things like that. And I'll put all my, I had recording equipment and stuff in, so I'll put it all there. And then when the money comes back, I'll just, get rid of this place, and then we'll go to New York. At that time, it wouldn't matter.
Let me ask you a question. You had your parents' support all the way through, as this is all going on over the years?
I did. In the course of the writing sessions between Marinol and I, my mom had passed away.
Oh, okay.
She passed away young. She was 52, passed away from cancer. And which, I tell people it was probably one of the most horrific days of my life, but one of the most epic days of my life because I learned so much. Everything became that much more important. I mean, I saw how my mom at 52 years old was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. They gave her 2 to 4 months to live. She lived like 2 years.
Oh, wow.
She was a fighter. But seeing that really it reinforced that failure is not an option. And you can keep fighting and you can keep fighting. And as long as you have something to fight for.
Life is short. You got to make every day count.
It's exactly it.
That's right.
So, I took that to heart. So that really that was one of the reasons why actually I had left the band, the rock band, and focused on this full time. I'm like, I have an opportunity here. I've been given a gift and I need to do something with it. So that's when I went in full time with this.
I was holding off. I was going to ask you later, but that it is a gift what you were able to do, what you hear and what you can do. And I wasn't sure if you saw it that way.
At the time, I don't know that I saw it as a gift. It was just more of an unconscious drive. I didn't, my parents didn't have money. I didn't come, I wasn't, all right, I'll just say, because you can edit out. I'm not part of the Lucky Sperm Club.
Yeah, neither am I.
Yeah, I mean,
you got to work for shit.
Yeah, you had to work for shit. So it just, everything was that much more important to me. So, it was really always about, failure's not an option and figure the shit out. Figure it out.
Yeah.
There's always
no plan B. There's no plan B.
I always used to joke around is I don't ever have a plan B because plan B sets plan A up for failure.
No, you go all in, plan A.
You just go
big or go home.
Now, at the same time, plan A sometimes takes you in different directions, kind of what we were talking about. Bumper cars.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, my story started out me wanting to be a rock star, now kind of starting to go into still a rock star, but, behind the scenes as a producer and an engineer and things like that.
I'm going to pop in
Sure.
here and there. Were you feeling disappointment that dream might not be what you wanted it to be at that time? Did you even realize the dream could be something else? At
that time, I didn't realize it because I was still expecting the deal to come through. I was waiting for these guys to come through. So that's why I built this room. Now I get this room built up and I, max out my credit card. I got a bunch of credit card bills on my dad's that I got to pay for. I mean, he wasn't giving me the money. He's like,
right.
Motherfucker, you got to pay for it. Yeah. You got to pay at least the monthly payment on that, the minimum payment, whatever. And I was always a hard worker too. So, I wasn't afraid to do that. But, so now we're here and we're going to do some pre-production here. And once the money comes back, and then we'll get rid of this and we'll just move on. So, that week, couple of months, that waiting game is getting longer and longer. And now all of a sudden the credit card bills are starting to come due and things like that. And I'm like, now I'm starting to get a little nervous. Failure's still not an option. So I get a couple phone calls. I've always had these little studios set up and I would record other bands and things like that. Rob, I hear you have a studio set up. Do you think you could, throw some tracks down for me? I'm looking at the credit card bills over here. And
Come on over.
Exactly. Come on over.
Right.
So I'm working on the Lotus Blossom project during the day, and I'm twisting knobs from everybody and their mother at night.
Right.
So, I'm just trying to stay above water.
Did anybody pass through that actually went on to actually be successful?
There have. We've there's been a lot of, we've had a lot of signed artists and things like that. And if you put me on the spot, I will never remember any of them. But if you,
that's okay.
Yeah,
Because so many people probably come through and they're paying you, but then next thing you know, oh my God, they went somewhere.
There's a lot of that, and as we grew, we first started, so this really first started as. Well, actually, let me. I
don't mean to sidetrack you.
Yeah, let me
stay where you are.
Into that. So, so I'm twisting knobs for everybody else at night, and the waiting game kind of, it actually ended up killing the project. It went from well, we're still waiting. So it went from the side burner to the back burner. And then it was just like, this ain't going to happen. So it never did. But the studio was kind of a byproduct.
Now answer the question about disappointment. So that's where it happened. So were you disappointed?
I can't say that I wasn't disappointed, but back to your bumper cars analogy, I knew that I was off to a little different
You recognized
direction.
You knew it.
I recognized that there was an opportunity here because at the end of the day, I maxed out all these credit cards based on this investment. That investment's not there. Well, I had better do something to pay these credit cards off. I wasn't going to put my dad into financial stress because of, me rolling the dice and going all in on something. So it was important to me to make good on all of that stuff.
Right.
So I was like, well, I've got the studio. So we started, it was just a single bay, a control room and a live room. And so I'm twisting knobs. And so how we kind of got known was, other than word of mouth, was there was back to the local music magazine. Back then it was Rag Magazine. There was a guy who was a friend of mine. He was a writer. His artist name was Trash, a guy named Chris Bright, and he was a writer. And, like all of us, we're broke and we can't afford to record. And so we became friends. And I was like, well, hey, listen, why don't I do a deal with you here? I'll record some of your stuff here. I'll record your, 10 songs. I'll do it for free. And in return, just put the studio in the Rag magazine as much as you can. If you're going to do an interview with an artist, bring them here. Take a picture of them here. Artists that we record, do articles on them and just put your name in there. Now, ironically, the magic with that was, because Tony kind of spec'd out this room, it was kind of the same acoustical formula. So he let me call the studio Power Station.
Huge.
So, massive. So
everybody knows who you are.
So the funny thing was Chris Trash, he took this to heart and he went all in on this himself. And I counted one time in a magazine, Power Station Studios was mentioned like 26 times.
Oh my God.
Between articles of different people. It was absolutely absurd. But I attribute that to part of the initial awareness, and then the calls started coming in. And then, the studio kept growing and kept growing and kept growing. And then, Tony would get, some label stuff, found out that Tony was working in a studio in Pompton. So I'm his engineer. So I'm doing all the work, under him. So we would get some label gig stuff and we'd do it there. And it just kind of kept growing and growing. And then in 2005, we were kind of busting at the seams. We weren't making any money, but we were staying busy. And, I decided to expand. So I took the bay next door over and created a second studio, a lounge, a little office that we could actually kind of turn it into an actual business. Because up until then, it kind of was my private production suite. I was making money to, eke out the bills and pay this and pay that. One of the things that we did there was we did a record for an artist that Tony had co-developed, a artist that got a record deal, and we were able to do the production. Tony was producing the record, and what was funny, it was a double-edged sword. So they locked out 3 months of the studio straight, at day rate. So it was like money coming in.
That's solid.
Goodness.
Right.
So I got paid for that, and I'll never forget, I walked into my dad's living room and I dropped down a stack of cash.
Yeah, we're even now.
Pay the credit card off.
Right.
So that's really where the money went, was to pay the credit card off.
But this is in 2005. In 2005, music was changing dramatically.
Yeah, and this was like an urban project to this particular
That's what I was
project.
wondering, because it was changing. The band thing was starting to change around then. It was 2005. It was becoming like
hip hop was blowing up,
thinking about the guy,
Miami,
DJ Jazzy Jeff or whatever. You remember?
Yeah, and then you had the 2 Live Crew that kind of started paving ways and things.
So they were using the studio?
No,
not them, but people like that.
Yeah, we were getting a little of everything.
So it didn't matter. You were like universal. With
this local magazine and word of mouth, we were building up a little bit of a clientele here. Where I was, just kind of doing this thing, and so we did this label thing. They locked us out for 3 months. I paid off my dad, which was awesome. But then I learned the biggest lesson of a lifetime with that studio. So that studio, what built that studio was people, the local community. So I bring in this label project. I close the studio out for 3 months. Everybody went elsewhere because they couldn't get into the studio. It took me 3 years to build that back up. We lost, because client wants to come in. They want to do a record. Well,
sorry, can't.
We can't. We're booked up. So what do? They go somewhere else. And then now, it's relationships. They kind of went over there, and all of a sudden everything just kind of trailed off. So that was the first lesson of people, the real lesson of, smack in the face of how important people are. So I vowed to, as we built this business, is to build it around the local community. The local community is what gave me my opportunity as a musician, to be able to get the, record deals that turned down, but nevertheless is what got them. It was about the local communities. So, that was the new focus of the studio, was build it with the local community. We have our card rates, but then I would lower the rates, for the local community. I could never afford to go into a big studio or a studio of what we were turning into. So I wanted to be, we're in Pompton. The overhead was nothing.
Right. It's your way of giving back.
Yeah, in a sense. I'm in a shitty building with shitty parking and, whatever. But at the end of the day, our overhead was low enough that we could survive. We survived the recession in 2008. And we ended up becoming one of the biggest studios. Coincidentally, working with Tony along this time, was he had this audio technology that he kind of created. Tony also is a private pilot. He has his own twin engine.
Of course he is.
Yeah, that's his hobby.
He's an astronaut.
It's just being a genius. You have to have big hobbies. Anyhow, part of his passion was aviation. So he had created he created this technology by way of, the goal was he wanted tunes in his plane. He wanted to crank up the radio and jam out in his plane. And in a small high noise environment where weight is an issue, you can't put subwoofers and amplifiers. So he came up with this concept using very small speakers and arrays of stuff to create a process that he could create enough sound over the noise floor to enjoy music. So he had this technology, and we kind of started working with this, and that was the birth of a technology company called Bongiovi Acoustic Labs, which now takes that core technology, which now has over 47 patents, and incorporated it into consumer electronics, aviation, automotive, medical applications. So I kind of, parallel.
He's getting a royalty or a piece of every single thing that's put out using that technology?
Well, that's the whole business model of the company, is a royalty, is a license company to license the technology for other manufacturers as solutions to their audio problems.
Wow.
So, everything from cars to airplanes to medical applications. And
that technology is in all of those.
It's in a lot of vehicles, yeah, right now. Overseas in the United States, it's in a marine and in boats and things like that, and then consumer electronics as well. And and then medical applications. Everything from stethoscopes to hearing aids, and it's all music, it's all audio. And so I kind of gravitated with Tony into that. So I got sucked into the technology side. So now I'm doing studio, doing technology, and I'm starting to juggle these crazy balls.
He's really got a good partner in you as operationally. I guess is what I'm hearing. Like you're really dedicated and committed, and these things you keep things like moving. Like
no, it's back to that. Failure is not an option,
right?
And you're only as good as the people that you surround yourself with.
That's right.
And
huge lesson right there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's how I became good at what I was doing. And as the studio took off, I started to get to work with some of the guys that you mentioned. The name Ron St. Germain. Tony taught me all the fundamentals. But Saint taught me all the cool shit. Saint brought me in on records. I got to sit on and work with him on different records. Like he produced Scott Stapp's solo record 311, and I got to be a part of all these records.
It's Creed, right? Scott Stapp
and then
Creed.
and then got to do some records of my own, and we actually got our first gold and platinum record doing that R&B project that we closed the studio down for. Yeah. But that was our first gold record. That song, that one of the songs ended up in a soundtrack for, I can't remember the name. It's one of those movies, soundtracks with, I don't know, escapes me as the moment. It shouldn't, but it does.
Happens all the time to me.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Your dream actually came true. It really did, just in a different way, but the same outcome in a way.
It is, and it just keeps progressing and progressing, and we kept growing the studio and growing the studio. And as a matter of fact, a week ago, last Monday, which was January the 3rd, this little studio, it kind of grew into its own self. We celebrated the 20th anniversary of our first session.
No kidding.
Yeah. And then it was a crazy week. And we had rock and roll fantasy camp come in. So you had, they do all the rock stars that come in and you play along with your rock stars. And so it's been a crazy run, but it's
what
here.
A story, man.
Yeah.
I didn't want to stop you too many times.
You should. I can go for days.
I can't read my own handwriting. So you mentioned that the change in music over the years, it doesn't matter to what you guys are doing. Studio is a studio, so you can accommodate any of those changes in music.
Yeah, see, the thing is because I have such a background, because of Tony in general engineering, audio engineering. I mean, keep in mind, if you go back to the days of the 30s and the 40s, the guys recording the sound, they weren't recording engineers. They didn't exist. Do you know what they were?
I'm thinking people in a room with a microphone.
Yeah, those guys that were recording they're called electrical engineers.
Oh, okay.
That's where it started, was electricity. Electricity, sound, light. There's a lot of correlation that goes on between that stuff. So, me getting a discipline from guys like Tony Bongiovi, Ron St. Germain, and Tony's expertise and acoustical background, I pick all this stuff up, and he kicked the back of my chair enough to where I can actually start to retain some of this stuff.
Right.
But I became a jailhouse acoustical engineer, producer. I learned it under his tutelage and on the streets, but I know the fundamentals of engineering. So whether it's rock, whether it's rap, whether it's country, whether it's bluegrass, whether it's hip, whatever it is, that's what made this studio excel, because you have the day of I call it the YouTube engineer. You have YouTube. You can learn how to do anything. Engineering's no different.
You had the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, right? There are bands that latched onto something, and they kept on going and going and going. Is it that MoTown thing? Is there something that's special about what those bands do? And you mentioned a couple, Aerosmith obviously, and Bongiovi obviously. They're going through decades, and they keep changing the music, but they still have a sound.
They still have a sound,
and people still love the way that it feels. Mm-hmm. So what are they doing that other people just can't seem to figure out?
The key element, the song.
The song.
It's all about songwriting. Now, good song. One thing I've learned about, with producing and learned from Tony is that good songwriting is truly timeless. I mean, you look at all the stuff that gets sampled in hip hop and stuff, all these old songs.
Look at Elton John now. Just like Dua Lipa or something. There's like just,
yeah, absolutely.
I forget what it is. It's a great song.
It's amazing. But good songwriting, I mean, you can take an old song from any time period,
right?
Change the style in which it's performed and played. You got a hit
new
song
again.
So that's the thing that the Aerosmiths, the Bon Jovis, the Michael Jackson, whomever and you look at the bands, let's look at Bon Jovi for a moment. 45 years later, and he's still on top of his game. He's still selling out arenas.
I just saw the dates. They're touring, and they're touring this year again.
Yeah, I mean, it's because his song.
He's got, what is he, in his 50s now? How old is he?
I don't know. I mean, he's got to be, I don't know.
But I mean, so you're talking decades, and the songs still kind of sound the same. There's that sound.
But see, John has got that style that's unique to him. So when his voice goes on there, he has an identity. And it doesn't hurt that he has, 40 plus years of people hearing that identity. So he's a brand. His voice, his style, he's created something that'll last forever.
Look at Bruce. That's another one.
You
got grandparents. I mean, you think of people that are now, in their 70s, 60s, 70s, their kids are with him, but then their kids are with him. That's 3 generations of people. And all of his music sounds the same, but it's all different.
It's all different.
It's got a sound.
And keep in mind, what can make a song relevant and artists like that keep going is that, you're singing about experiences, and they could be new experiences. Like, in the 70s, you wouldn't have any references to social media or Facebook or Instagram.
Right.
But, these guys they can write that into that. Before it was, telegraph and, and smoke signals.
Right.
And today it's hashtag this or that. They adapt, but it's still good songwriting. The core to the industry is songwriting.
Like Bruce's songs are like those stories.
They tell stories.
Anybody can connect with the average man's
absolutely, and I think
journey.
That's one of the downsides, since technology has brought recording capabilities to just about every Tom, Dick, and Harry. The problem is that the technology dictates what's being recorded, and you go back and listen to the stories of Tony back at MoTown. You got Holland, and Dozier just working out songs and sitting on there, and they're developing this songwriting. It was about the talent of their songwriting and the skill in their craft, where nowadays it's kind of homogenized. So I think that's one of the things why I think music almost evolves a little quicker, is because trend will start to pick up, and like a certain sound or a vibe or some style will pick up, and it won't last long. And then it takes songwriting to pick it back up again. Songwriting always, different sounds and different ideas and different, styles of music will change quickly. And again, vibrations, it's like a new sound, whether it's a new type of, reggaeton came out. It was like something new. It was like that vibe was awesome and people gravitated towards it. And then all of a sudden, the songwriting kind of caught up to it. And then, then you meander, into something else.
I got to ask you 2 more questions. What do you think about auto-tune?
It's a lot.
We don't have to go there if you don't.
No. It's a tool, number one. Now, it's an effect, but on a tool, understand that in production, under pitch correction, everybody has some sort of pitch correction. Now, as a producer, I want them to sing the best performance, but auto-tune, we use Melodyne as a product that we use, but pitch correction, it should be just the parsley on the plate. Styles now that people they pitch correct the crap out of everything. So, when you overproduce this stuff, you take the life out of it. You go back and listen to like Robert Plant or Stevie Nicks or something, there's variations in their pitch all the way. But if you took that out,
they can still sing.
Of course they can. But if you pitch corrected them to what was notationally perfect, you would lose all of what makes their identity them. So that's a trend now, is having that pitch perfect thing. I think there's a happy medium into it. I don't like to, pitch correct things to where you just completely take the personality out of the performer. Yeah, but it's a tool.
Last question. Will rock actually come back? Will the way it was before actually find its way back, where people are writing songs, playing as a band, and it's real?
I don't think it's ever really left. Mainstream music, what you're hearing on the radio, has obviously changed, but there's still those people that
That's what I'm talking about, though.
that love, that pick up an instrument, they fall in love. I mean, you look at Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters. I mean, he's still killing it out there. He's on top of the world right now.
Ridiculous.
It's amazing what he's doing, and people see that, and he inspires people. And he's a huge social media following, and he's so he connects with people. Again, back to the people.
And thank God he's doing it, because he's keeping that alive.
But I think he has single-handedly created another generation of musicians. Everything like the drum competition with the Nandi girl.
I saw that. Yeah, is that crazy?
I mean, and
what's she, like 8 or something? She's
I don't know, but she's amazing. But he connected with her. It's connecting with people, and he's connected, and then people connected with that connection. Yeah. And I think he's single-handedly inspired a whole new generation of musicians and stuff like that. So to answer your question, I don't think rock and roll ever went away, but I think everything's kind of a cycle, and it's gonna continue on.
I hope so.
Absolutely.
There's a couple things I want to like just say that you pointed out, because they're common themes with everybody that I've talked to that is successful in one way or another. And you said a million times, failure is not an option. And that is a huge theme.
I would repeat that to myself over and over.
It's a huge theme. You've seen opportunities, and you've actually been able to recognize them and actually seize on them, rather than kind of letting them go by and not even paying attention. People and process. Big theme with people that I talk to. And you're saying being relentless. I'm not sure if you said that, but I heard that from what you were saying.
Absolutely.
Act as if was awesome.
I'll never forget that. It was my guitar player's brother, Raul. He started with nothing and became a podiatrist. And it was the same drive. And he loves music, and he'd come back and he's like, guys, you just got to act as if. And he would say that to it and it just resonated with me.
Yeah, it's like a vibe. People just
and it's funny how just one sentence out of one specific random person can just change things.
You're very intuitive. Like, I mean, it's such a combination of things, being an entrepreneur, but I'm hearing you tell these stories, and it's like you just sort of intuitively are like bobbing and weaving, and like you're bouncing around like that bumper car we talked about.
It could be intuition, but it could also be just a lot of good luck.
It could be, okay.
I mean, I'd like to think that I'm intuitive and stuff, but I honestly believe that a lot of things I got lucky. But luck, each person breeds luck. Opportunity is one of these things. There's two things about opportunity that I always believe. You have to be in a position in life to be able to see it, and then you also have to be in a position in life to be able to achieve it. If you can't see it, recognize it.
Yep.
Well, then you're never going to achieve it. And if you're not in a position to achieve it, you can see it, but if you're not there, you're done.
You just said what I was going to say. It's opportunity and preparedness.
Yeah,
is luck, but you just said it in a much better way.
Well,
and the last thing is relationships. It comes up a lot. They are everything, and every story that you talked about. It's relationships. And I heard more. It's integrity, it's character, it's trust, it's loyalty. That's all in your story.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, I grew up, my grandfather was both my grandfathers were extremely smart guys, and I learned so much from them. And, it's the 2 ears and 1 mouth, listen twice as much as you speak kind of thing. They were known, both of them had these one-liners, but that was a greatest generation. And there's a reason people call that the greatest generation. But, it was just learning how to loyalty. I mean, that's the one thing I have is people, they're quick to cut these days, and that doesn't get you anywhere. Being loyal and being a team player and ego, not having, having a good ego, but not having a bad, some of these egos.
Check it at the door.
That's it. And that's one of the things with Power Station that I always breed to our guys is that, there's no egos there. People enjoy and they have fun there. It's all about, I have one rule. If I'm not having fun, I don't want to freaking be there. But what I tell them, I say, guys, in our industry, producers, engineers, they always have this ego and their nose up in the air, like their stuff doesn't stink. But I always teach these guys 2 things. Number 1, don't always be so concerned of what's going to come here, what you're getting out of it immediately. Focus out there. This will take care of itself. Keep your eye on the distance. Put the time in. I mean, you got to pay your bills and stuff, but 100%. Keep focused on goals. And then, then the second thing is really that Where was I going with that?
It'll come back to you.
Yeah.
So the theme of relationships.
Oh, that's what I was
Coming
going to
up.
say. The relationship thing, is we're service providers here, and there's a world of egos out there. We're no different than the person working at McDonald's or the person mowing a lawn or cleaning toilets. I mean, albeit it's a specialized service, but we are there to provide a service to the artist.
Yeah.
And that was been the mission of Power Station. That was something I learned from Power Station New York. It's always about the people. There was a certain heart. I wanted that heart down here, and that's the key to where we survived there. And those same relationships is what's allowed us to grow in the technology side. I mean, we just released our first physical product, a brand called Clear 360, some hearing protection devices and things like that. But if it wasn't for the people, those products would never exist.
Rob Roy, I'm going to give you the COVID shake.
Yes.
A serial entrepreneur, producer. I mean, I'm listening to this. This is like a magical story, man. Anybody that's watching this to not be inspired and motivated, it's hard not to. It's cool because it's music and it's a fun conversation. But it's the theme that comes up over and over and over, and you're just another successful person saying the same thing, and it's common. And these are like universal truths, the things you're talking about.
I mean, success is a relative term too. I mean,
I'm talking. Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking. Listen, we have joy, happiness, love, peace.
Yeah.
That's true success. Which is we're talking about. How do you go from not much to something?
Failure's not an option.
Failure's not an option. So I end every show by going like this. I look at the camera and I say, "Be humble, hustle, and do the work." And that's what this guy has done. And this is awesome. It's motivational. And I thank you so much.
It's been fun.
I had the best time.
I mean, I don't get a chance to talk about myself very often. So, hey, what?
There you go. There you go. So, Rob, if you have a place where you can be reached, if there's Instagram, Facebook, studio, look at this camera. Tell everybody how they can find you. And
well, I split myself between two worlds. On the entertainment side, you can always look for me at the studio. Our social is at Power Station FL. That goes for Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And then on the corporate side, with some of our products and stuff that we have coming out, our social handle is All Clear 360.
Awesome. Thanks again, man.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it. Loved it.
Happy to be here. It was a lot of fun.